Hey, Randy. So we did a compression test on your engine, and I would call it fair. We really need to, and whether it was bad, good, or fair, we need to run the engine. So that's the next step, is to run the engine. We tried that. We can't get the engine to run. It needs a tune-up. So the points, plugs, condenser, wire, plugs, did I mention plugs? Points, plugs, wires, and condensers, cap, distributor cap, and rotor. Those parts and the half a day's labor to install them would run about $750. If you want electronic ignition, if you want to upgrade at this time, that would cost another $250 to $300. So that would take us up near $1,000. So $750 minimum. That's where we're at right now. We need to spend $750 to get this engine operating at the that's our first step. That's our simplest step, and least expensive step. Okay, so if we get done and it still won't run, or it runs poorly, then if it runs good, we'll just store the engine. We won't take it out. We'll just store it in the boat while we're doing the work on the boat. We'll cover it up and so forth. If it runs poorly, or won't run at all, then the next thing we do is we do a leak down test. And what we do there is you put compressed air on each cylinder, and we see how much is leaking and where it's leaking from. If the air is leaking past the rings and the piston, then that means we have to do a rebuild, and that's going to be about $6,000 on that engine. If the air leaks out of the intake or the exhaust, then we would do a valve job, because we've already adjusted the valves up here. We did a tune-up and we adjusted the valves. So we'd come down here and we'd do a valve job. What a valve job is we disassemble, take the heads off the engine, grind the valves, install hardened seats while we're in there so that you can run unleaded fuel. Your exhaust seats only would have to be changed. To the intake seats don't need to be changed. They're wet. They've got a fuel and air mixture. But the exhaust valves would be, that's what lead was added years ago to fuel to lubricate the exhaust valves. So we would install hardened seats, and then we would reinstall the heads, and that best case would be around $750. Worst case would be around $1,500. Now, look at worst case, that's replacing every single valve and every valve spring, and completely rebuilding the head. That's probably, we can probably reuse the valves, most of the valves anyway, reuse the springs and the retainers and all that stuff. So we're somewhere between $750 and $1,500 for that step. And then, so after we do the valve job, we would again run the engine. If it runs good, we would store it in the boat. And if it runs poorly, then, we got to go back up to the tune-up level and see what happened up at the tune-up level. But the leak down test would determine whether or not the engine is worn out, or the piston rings are broken or worn out. And the other thing that happens when we pull the heads for a valve job, we would actually, we may have more than one problem. If we pull the heads for the valve job and we find that the cylinders are scored, that's the first chance you get to look inside the cylinders. If we find out that those are scored, worn out, then that could take us to a engine rebuild. But the leak down test is a non-destructive test, and that should tell us what we need to know. So I just wanted to go through that troubleshooting chart with you and show you that's where we're at on the engine. To know more, we're going to have to spend the $750 and do the tune-up and adjust the valves. All right, thank you.